Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dr. Robert Marx, a retired professor of the University of Miami School of Medicine. This is a YouTube presentation on climate change, the hoax of CO2. This will be a preamble to what you're going to view over approximately 10 different segments. This is based on Climate Change, a Hoax of CO2 Revealed, my latest book on how climate change really occurs and that CO2 has really nothing to do with climate change. The book will tell you that climate change is real. It's advancing slowly at the rate of 1 degree Fahrenheit per century, different from what your politicians are telling you, and that the sea level rise is not due to melting of glaciers. Now, that may be in confrontation with what you're hearing, but stick with this, and I think you will find some interesting data. Now, this is how you can order my book. I would please if you would. And then as we start this, I will show you that there is my uh, email address and my phone number, as well as the publisher. We're open for questions and challenges. So this is all really transparent, things that politicians talk about, but very rarely do. So I keep showing this, but look at the top of this. How do we determine what the temperature was 4,000 years ago? It's actually very easy. This is called the oxygen 18 isotope curve, which directly correlates to the temperature of the atmosphere at the time the core is taken, where they can tell the depth of the core of what years it was. So note, Earth's temperatures began rising 70 years ago. 1850 is the benchmark. Before atmospheric CO2 began rising. CO2 began rising, atmospheric CO2, roughly around 1920. That is, CO2 increases are from the dissolved CO2 in our oceans, not from fossil fuels. What Al Gore had completely reversed and wrong was that he saw CO2 rise, he saw Earth's temperatures rise, and he made a direct correlation. Actually, it's the reverse. The Earth's temperature rose before CO2 rose. And here is why. Now, don't be confused by a graph, but what I want to illustrate to you, look on the left margin, solubility of CO2 in water. In other words, how much carbon dioxide is dissolved in water. You'll notice on the bottom, as the temperature goes up, the amount of CO2 that can be held by water goes down. Where does that CO2 go when the temperature of the water goes up? It goes into the atmosphere. And this is what Al Gore and James Hansen had completely wrong, because they had no background in chemistry or physics. You may example this by taking a glass of very cold water and just put it in a warm atmosphere onto your kitchen table, so to speak. After a couple hours, you will see bubbles form on the side. That is the dissolved CO2, the dissolved O2, oxygen, the dissolved nitrogen forming and coming out of the water. That's your normal tap water. That tells you that the warmer the water is, the more CO2 it releases in the atmosphere. So, okay, the solubility of CO2 in our oceans decreases, temperature rises. That is CO2 released into the atmosphere. So, are the oceans warming? Yes, they are. They're due to the sun and the Milankovitch cycles. And when that ocean warms up just a little bit, it releases one heck of a lot of CO2. Here is some of the numbers. The ocean volume and temperature. The total ocean volume that scientists put out now is 3.56 times 10 to the 19th gallons. Now, what's 10 to the 19th gallons? You all know what a gallon of milk is. A gallon of water is the same volume, but a billion is 10 to the 9th. A trillion is 10 to the 12th. A gazillion is 10 to the 15th, and we don't have too much after 10 to the 15th. This is an enormous amount of water, and that's just oceans. It doesn't include lakes like our Great Lakes. Now, the total ocean CO2 then, if you measure and run the numbers again, contains 240,000 trillion. These numbers are hard to even verbalize. 240,000 trillion tons of CO2. That's the biggest reservoir of CO2 on Earth today. And so a temperature change of just 1/10 of a degree Fahrenheit will release 31.25 trillion tons of CO2. All right, how does that compare to fossil fuels? Fossil fuels release 25 billion tons. That's a magnitude of over 1,000 times more by just a 10th of a degree in Fahrenheit. So the CO2 rise that is being attributed to the global warming is actually from global warming. The CO2 rise is coming from our oceans. Now, this is, again, the James Hansen screw up, if you want to call it that. Take a look at the black line. The black line is the temperature rise from 1985 to now. This is due, again, to the Milankovitch cycles and the solar output. This is what James Hansen predicted when 2005 came along and they did the inconvenient truth. They predicted it would do this. But the actual observation is not. Predictions need to follow with hard reality. So those predictions are wrong. Remember, Al Gore and James Hansen predicted there'd be no ice left in the Arctic by 2015. Here we're 9 years from that, and there's plenty of ice left in the Arctic. It hasn't changed. The Greenland ice sheet has actually thickened, and the ice sheet hasn't changed since 1983. Ladies and gentlemen, we've all been misled. I'm trying to show you some hardcore facts that refute some of their assertions. So, no, a gradual ocean temperature rise is going on. It caused an atmospheric rise in CO2. The rise in atmospheric CO2 did not cause a rise in atmospheric temperature. The greenhouse gas theory related to CO2 is bogus. There is a greenhouse gas, but the CO2 hasn't increased it to any large extent. The increased heat is coming from the sun and the Milankovitch cycles. Okay, so what is actually causing sea level rise? Well, here's my fourth thing. Glacier melt, I'll go through. Land rebound after the last ice age. Man's encroachment into the oceans. And a natural encroachment into the ocean. What does that mean? Let me show you each one of them.